The smell of banana pancakes drifted through the air just seconds before the sky exploded. Riven Kane, a 9-year-old with syrup on his chin and wild curiosity in his eyes, had just asked the most important question of his life. "Mom, why do we hide our last name when we travel?" The answer never came. What did come was a sudden silence that bent the walls of the dome house inward, then shattered them in a thunderclap of light and force. Outside, the Empire's drones painted the morning with flame. Inside, the plate of pancakes hit the floor, untouched, still warm. By the time the fire settled, the Empire had added another number to its list of neutralized domestic threats. No survivors reported. No mention of a child. Just another clean, efficient operation logged into their record books. But the system didn't realize they missed someone. They missed his mother. Nova Kane had once been the most feared assassin on Earth. Her name hadn't just vanished from the Empire's database. It had been erased by design, blacked out even in classified Earth archives. Her past was a ghost story whispered in elite military camps and outlaw syndicates. She had walked away from that life nearly a decade ago to raise her son. She had wanted peace, pancakes, and silence. She got 2 of those. The silence was now deafening. Standing at the edge of the blast crater where her home used to be, Nova didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even blink. Her right hand, scarred from 100 blades, reached down into the ash and retrieved a half-melted teddy bear, Riven's. Its eye was missing. She turned and walked into the wind, leaving no trace of her direction. But she left behind something else. The Empire didn't know it yet, but at that exact moment, they were already dead. Hours before the strike, she had been in a nearby outpost, bartering over eggs and old milk. She had argued with the Martian grocer about the legality of selling dairy on a level 3 off-Earth settlement. The grocer's beard had been dyed purple, and he insisted the milk was probably not expired, just evolving. Nova had rolled her eyes, joked about how Earth's Black Ops veterans didn't survive interplanetary war just to negotiate lactose rights, and bought the milk anyway. That's why she wasn't home. The randomness of it struck her as cruel. She had survived a sniper team in Titan stormfronts, a poison capsule hidden in her molar, and a plasma rope accident that burned half her leg. But it was the Empire's lazy bureaucratic targeting algorithm that took her son. They thought she was inside. They thought the house was just a tactical blip. They didn't know it contained the only reason she ever put down her gun. The drone strike wasn't even reported on galactic feeds for 12 hours. When it was framed as an anti-terror sweep. Target: unknown female operative suspected of harboring anti-Empire data. Body count 6. No survivors. No mention of a child. The only person who noticed the discrepancy was a retired Empire general living in exile on Neptune. When he read the report, he nearly dropped his synth cigar. He called an encrypted line buried deep within the Empire's inner AI network. The voice that answered asked him to verify code clearance. He gave only 2 words, Red Sigma. Then he whispered, "She's back." In a hidden bunker beneath an abandoned shipping port on Callisto, Nova stood before a rust-covered control panel. Her fingers moved fast, muscle memory overriding thought. The keypad chirped alive. This was a place she swore she would never return to. Inside the vault was a weapons locker. Inside that, her past. The armor was still there. It looked older, colder. She didn't put it on yet. She sat. She looked at Riven's bear again. She spoke to the room like it was listening. Maybe it was. "You wanted me erased. You should have erased everything." A panel on the wall lit up. Her voice activated the Widow Protocol. The protocol was only supposed to activate upon genetic death confirmation of her offspring. A failsafe, coded in the days when she still believed in paranoia over parenthood. Now it was real. The system projected 12 faces, officers, advisors, and one unknown AI proxy, each tied to the authorization code that greenlit the drone strike. It wasn't random. Someone targeted that house. And she had the list. The first one would be easy. Dr. Jens Koros, an Empire data analyst stationed in orbit over Venus. He'd always been arrogant. Once boasted he could track Nova by heartbeat signature. He'd never considered she'd change her biometric rhythms. That was his mistake. Nova reconfigured an old pulse disruptor she once used to fake death in an assassination gone wrong. She routed a false signal through the Venusian medical AI overseeing his cryopod chamber. At precisely 0200, the system mistook his healthy heart for flatline and administered an auto-purge. His body was reduced to nutrient paste in under 30 seconds. Empire called it a maintenance accident. That wasn't even the message. The message came later. When his supervisor opened his locker, they found a handwritten note in his native dialect. It read, "For Riven." No signature. No trace. Just the start. Back in the Callisto vault, Nova began mapping the remaining targets. She knew they would realize it was her eventually. But she also knew by the time they did, half would be dead. She had time. Time and rage. And maybe just enough sense of humor left to leave a few reminders. The Empire's AI system began to behave oddly. One officer received a weather report predicting emotional storms. Another had their portrait replaced with a teddy bear on official documents. And in the surveillance hall where strike decisions were usually made, every screen briefly flickered to a static image, a child's drawing of pancakes, and the words, "Mom's home." The panic would come soon. The defenses would rise. But nothing would stop it now. Nova Kane was back. And she wasn't here for justice. She was here for revenge. Calculated. Clean. And personal. The rain on the Venusian processing station didn't fall like on Earth. It hissed down in thin streams of chemically filtered mist that never touched the surface, absorbed by magnetic shields before ever kissing metal. Inside one of the Empire's high-security research labs, the mood had shifted from routine to panic. Dr. Yenth Koros, renowned data architect and egotistical genius, had died the previous night in what the AI called a thermoregulatory error. But there was no malfunction. No bug. Just a flawless sequence of commands executed from nowhere. By morning, every surveillance node in the station was wiped clean. The only clue was the small, handwritten message found in his chamber, and that message was never supposed to exist. That made the remaining officers nervous. One tried to joke that maybe the dead doctor forgot to pay his heating bill. No one laughed. They all knew the real reason behind their fear. She was alive. The one whose name they weren't even allowed to say in briefings. A name that had been marked Red Sigma and erased from operational memory for 15 years. Nova Kane. Back on Callisto, Nova sat in silence. Her fingers wrapped tightly around a neural injector, a tool she'd stolen from an old Empire war lab during her escape years ago. She didn't use it for enhancements anymore. She used it to stay awake. Sleep brought memories. And memories meant seeing his face. Riven had his father's eyes, the kind that looked too soft for a galaxy built on steel. Nova hadn't seen that man in almost a decade. He left before Riven was born, disappeared into the Empire's blacklisted experiments, probably dead, probably dissected. Nova didn't care about him anymore. All she cared about now was finishing the list. One by one. The Widow Protocol was more than just a revenge blueprint. It was a failsafe from the days when she had no friends, no allies, only enemies who made temporary deals. It gave her full access to old Empire routes, bypass codes, and synthetic identities. But it also reminded her of who she used to be. She watched herself on old footage, stepping through blood and fire like a ghost. Her eyes were colder then, but her hands were steadier now. The next target wasn't going to be killed from afar. She needed to send a message louder than a cryochamber purge. She needed screams. Target number 2, Admiral Vars Grendak, currently docked aboard a luxury dreadnought named the Obsidian Crown. Retired from frontline warfare, now he lectured at Imperial academies about the importance of military ethics and tactical humility. Nova found the irony offensive. He had once supervised the slaughter of 2 million Martian civilians under false intelligence. Nova had nearly assassinated him during that war, but politics got in the way. Now there would be no interference. No warning. Getting aboard the dreadnought was easier than expected. The Widow Protocol granted her an identity from the Empire's ambassador registry. A diplomat named Kara Vyyn, complete with forged credentials and a fabricated backstory as an ethics consultant. No one questioned her. The Empire's arrogance was still its greatest weakness. She walked through the grand halls of the dreadnought like she belonged there. Artificial gravity hummed softly beneath polished marble floors. The scent of overfiltered air tried to mimic roses but failed. Guards saluted her. Officers smiled. It disgusted her. She found the Admiral in the observation lounge, staring out at Saturn's rings with a glass of blue wine and a grin only age and lies could shape. He was surrounded by students, young recruits eager for a scrap of wisdom. Nova listened to him speak. He called war a necessary evil. He said strategy mattered more than emotion. He told a story about how indecision once cost him a fleet, and how he learned to strike first, apologize later. The room laughed. Nova did not. She waited until the lounge emptied. Then she approached. The Admiral didn't recognize her. That made it easy. She asked about his career, his philosophies. He boasted. She smiled. She asked what the hardest decision of his life was. He said it was authorizing a drone strike on a suspected terrorist when he couldn't confirm her location. He mentioned a dome house. He said there was no child listed in the census records. He said he slept fine. Nova nodded slowly. Then she broke his jaw with a hidden blade from her wrist. She dragged him into the corridor, cutting through his security escort before they could raise an alarm. Alarms didn't matter anymore. She wanted them to see. She left a trail of blood through the Academy wing. The Dreadnought's AI panicked, flashing evacuation orders, emergency lockdowns, but none of it mattered. She reached the atrium, threw his broken body across the polished floor, and activated the public announcement system. She didn't shout. Her voice was steady, cold, and absolute. His name is Riven Kane. He was 9 years old. He made banana pancakes the morning you killed him. This is 2. I have 11 more. Do not send help. Send a priest. Then she disappeared. The Empire scrambled its fleets. High alert rippled across all military branches. One council member demanded they offer a bounty. Another suggested a peace offer. The AI War Council, still hiding behind layers of protocol and virtual shells, said nothing. But across the galaxy, whispers grew. Nova Kane had returned. Not for war. For revenge. For blood. For her son. Meanwhile, in a shadowy prison lab on Phobos, a failed clone of Riven convulsed in its tank. The scientists monitoring him were silent. They had tried to build a synthetic assassin in Nova's son's image. But the clone's mind broke every time they initiated the combat protocols. Every time the clone saw its own reflection, it screamed. And in those screams was one name, repeated again and again, though they never programmed it. He screamed for Nova. He screamed for his mother. In her stolen escape pod, Nova floated through asteroid fields, scanning for her next target. A cybernetics dealer named Parmexis, responsible for selling Empire-approved neural inhibitors to off-world colonies. One of those inhibitors was found in the wreckage of her home, still active, likely used to suppress external surveillance in the area during the strike. He didn't authorize the attack, but he enabled it. That was enough. No one escapes the list. She leaned back in the seat, pulled Riven Spare from her coat, and stared at it in the dim glow of red cockpit lights. She whispered a story she used to tell him at bedtime, about a star serpent that swallowed suns and burped out galaxies. She chuckled once. Then silence returned. But this silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Focused. Unstoppable. They thought they were killing a ghost. But ghosts don't bleed. She did. And now they would too. News traveled fast, even in a galaxy ruled by bureaucracy. 2 dead, both high-level, both connected to a classified drone strike, both killed within days of each other without a single sensor catching a usable image. The Empire's AI security net couldn't explain it. Whispers began to surface in officer lounges and bounty boards across systems. Someone was killing the untouchables, and they were doing it with style. Nova's name wasn't on any official list, but those who remembered her work didn't need confirmation. They already knew. One of those people was Sargis Ven, a bounty broker with 3 prosthetic eyes and a nose that twitched when someone used an alias. He called in a crew he hadn't worked with in years. They called themselves the Spiteful Seven, a team so chaotic they were banned from 3 quadrants and 1 wedding. They weren't hired because they were smart. They were hired because they were unpredictable. The Empire figured if Nova could predict everything, maybe what she needed was something too stupid to forecast. The crew arrived in a refurbished war freighter named the Elegant Blaster, which looked like it had been repaired with parts from a toaster and a shopping cart. The captain, Grux Maddle, was a 3-armed drunk who claimed to be half human, half squid, and entirely illegal in 5 systems. His team included a silent sniper named Bellis who only communicated through sarcasm typed into a wrist pad, a demolitions expert named Vig with more fingers than common sense, and a clone velociraptor in a tuxedo who had been taught diplomacy. No one ever figured out whose idea that last one was. Grux received the target briefing with a lazy smirk. All he saw was credits. The Empire had offered more money than he'd ever made blowing up planets for sport. All he had to do was find and kill 1 woman. Easy, he thought. Dead easy. Nova was watching them before they even left the dock. She had cracked into their mission feed 2 minutes after it uploaded. The Spiteful Seven were dangerous but also loud, sloppy, and soaked in ego. Perfect. She smiled for the first time in days. Not because they were coming but because they would lead her straight to her next target. The Empire had made a mistake letting these fools into its plan. Grux's ship carried a NAV signature linked to a former military transport hub on Mazeros 3. Nova hadn't noticed it on her own. But now it stood out like blood on glass. She redirected her course. The crew touched down on Mazeros 3 with 0 subtlety, announcing their presence by accidentally crashing into a food market. Vig apologized by handing out grenades labeled as party favors. Nova watched from a rooftop, cloaked in a reflective heat field that made her nearly invisible. She let them make noise, gather attention, act wild. Then she triggered the trap. She rerouted a security alert to the local militia saying that a war criminal named Grux Maddle had landed with contraband. Chaos erupted in minutes. The militia surrounded the area, demanding the crew surrender. Grux laughed, pulled out a guitar, and claimed diplomatic immunity through interpretive dance. Bellis shot out 2 security drones before being tossed by a 12-year-old with a cattle prod. The Raptor tried to negotiate but was tackled by a stampede of anti-clone protesters. It was a glorious mess. Amid the confusion, Nova slipped into the restricted zone where Parn Mexis, her 3rd target, was operating a black market tech ring. The lab was buried beneath a shipping container lot. She found him working on a neural suppression device, humming to himself and drinking something green. He didn't even look up when she entered. He thought she was one of the guards. He only realized the truth when she whispered his name the way a scalpel speaks before it cuts. He turned, hands trembling, and tried to speak, but she shoved a small device into his mouth before he could. It was a memory parasite, a cruel piece of tech that replayed your worst moment in a loop until your brain broke trying to stop it. She activated it and left him twitching on the ground, muttering nonsense about codes and children and forgotten promises. She didn't kill him. That was the message this time. Some of them deserved death. Others deserved to remember. And a few deserved to beg. She took his files, dumped his illegal prototypes into a gravity crusher, and walked away. When the militia finally breached the facility hours later, they found Parn babbling to a teddy bear he had drawn on the wall in his own blood. The Spiteful Seven were arrested, interrogated, fined, and released by accident when Grux hacked the holding cells using a coffee machine interface. By then, they were missing 2 members. Vig had wandered into a minefield while looking for snacks, and Bellis had vanished with Nova's trail burned into her retina. She had caught a glimpse of the real Nova and decided to switch professions. The last anyone heard from her, she had opened a small flower shop on a moon made of glass. Grux, unfazed by the loss, claimed he had another 12 crew members in cryosleep somewhere, probably. Word of the botched bounty mission spread quickly. The Empire tried to spin it as a victory, claiming Nova had been forced to flee. But leaked footage showed otherwise. The footage, sent anonymously to every major galactic news outlet, showed her calmly walking through fire, holding Parn's memory parasite in one hand, Riven's spear in the other. No fear. No pause. Just focus. The media dubbed her the Mother of Vengeance. The name stuck. Back in her hidden ship, Nova rested for a moment. Just a moment. She replayed the audio logs she stole from Parn's lab. Most were garbage, encrypted nonsense. But one line repeated. A phrase embedded into the drone protocols that destroyed her home. Operation Null Seed. That was the name of the strike. And it wasn't just hers. It was a program. Designed to target offspring of former assassins and traitors. Riven wasn't a mistake. He was on a list. A target. The Empire hadn't failed to detect him. They had chosen to erase him intentionally. That changed everything. She stared out the viewport at the sea of stars. Her path was no longer about vengeance. It was justice twisted through a blade. She wasn't just crossing names off a list anymore. She was hunting the people who made the list in the first place. Somewhere deep in the Empire's code vaults, someone had authorized a genocide in disguise. And she was going to burn the galaxy until she found them. They thought the spiteful Seven would stop her. But now she was just getting started. Ask ChatGPT. The silence inside the ship grew heavier with each passing hour. Nova hadn't slept in 2 days, not because she couldn't, but because every time she closed her eyes she saw his smile. Riven's face, frozen in time, untouched by the fire that swallowed him. His voice echoed inside her mind in moments of stillness, soft and curious, asking questions she never answered. The weight of her mission pressed against her chest like a second heart, beating louder than her pulse. She stood in front of the console, watching the stars drift by, cold and quiet. But the silence was deceptive. In the hidden compartments of the ship's system, her next target was already being tracked. She had uncovered something in Parn's data that disturbed even her. It was a buried protocol hidden behind triple encryption. Operation Null Seed was not a single event. It was a galaxy-wide cleansing program targeting the descendants of anyone the Empire had ever deemed dangerous, subversive, or inconvenient. Her son was not the only one. He was just one of the first. As her ship neared the ice fields of Lothar 9, she activated the deep signal scan. The cold moon was uninhabited, officially. But beneath the frozen surface was an Empire black site, one designed to test artificial loyalty implants. She had been there once, long ago, as a contractor hired to audit their security. What she didn't know then was that the Empire had continued its work in secret, using clones of children for combat simulation trials. They had taken DNA from every major species, including human samples sourced through illegal medical labs. One of those samples was listed as Riven.c. The file didn't say clone. It said candidate. And that was enough. She landed the ship under heavy cloak, using a thermal disguise module to mimic the signature of a drifting ice fragment. The facility was built into the mountain, shielded from sensors by its own layered design. Nova moved silently through the outer ring, slicing through the first checkpoint with a bypass key she had lifted from an admiral years ago, never thinking she would use it again. The hallways were quiet, lit with blue lights and stale recycled air. Everything was clean, too clean, like no one ever breathed here. She found the first room marked Candidate Assessment, and slipped inside. Rows of tanks lined the walls, each one containing a child in suspended animation. Not clones. Not synthetics. Children. Real, living children. Some had implants already embedded in their skulls. Others were still untouched. She saw no monitors of life signs. Just serial numbers. Just data. She felt her chest tighten in a way she had not felt since the day she buried Riven's bear in the ash. Her hand trembled slightly as she moved to the central console. The names were there, each one a child, each one tied to someone the Empire wanted erased. Rebels, hackers, pirates, freedom fighters, whistleblowers. All of them had children marked as threats not because of anything they had done but because of who their parents were. It was a generational extermination plan dressed up as security policy. Nova took a breath and closed her eyes. She forced her mind to go still. She couldn't afford to panic now. She uploaded a virus into the facility's power core, set a 10-minute countdown, and walked toward the command center. Inside, she found the project lead, a woman named Dr. Res Voya, former bioethicist turned government stooge. She sat behind a thick glass wall, protected by biometric locks. Nova entered the room like a shadow. Res turned and froze. Her mouth moved, trying to speak, but Nova didn't give her the chance. She activated a subdermal speaker embedded in her throat and played a voice recording. It was Res herself, testifying during a secret meeting 3 years ago. In the recording, she explained the need to neutralize potential threats early. She cited children as the logical weakness in every resistance network. She recommended surgical personality wipes as a possible measure. Her voice in the past was calm, clinical. Her voice now was silent, broken by fear. Nova stared through the glass at her. She didn't touch her weapon. She didn't need to. Instead, she disabled the air filtration system in the lab. The chamber would slowly fill with oxygen-starved recycled air, and Res would lose consciousness within minutes. Not fast. Not painful. Just enough time to think. Nova left her there, eyes wide, mouth open, clawing at the controls that no longer worked. On her way out, she paused at the tank marked with Riven's initials. Inside was a child who looked nothing like him but shared his DNA. She didn't destroy the tank. She opened it. The child collapsed into her arms, confused, half awake. She whispered to him the same words she once whispered to her own son. "You are not a weapon. You are not what they made you." She carried him to the ship just as the mountain began to shake. The virus triggered a chain reaction that collapsed the internal reactor. As she lifted off, the entire peak of Lothar 9 fractured, folding in on itself like paper in fire. The black sight vanished into ice and silence. The boy she rescued, no older than 7, slept in the back of the ship wrapped in her coat. He didn't speak. Didn't ask questions. But his breathing was steady. Alive. Free. That was enough. Nova sat in the cockpit and watched the fire below fade. The Empire would feel the loss. They would send hunters. Smarter ones. More prepared. But she didn't care. The truth was out now. She uploaded the files from the lab to an open broadcast channel used by independent journalists and outlaws. She encoded the files to spread across thousands of data nodes. Operation Null Seed was no longer a rumor. It was proof. The galaxy would know what the Empire had done. And some would rise. Some would fight. She was no longer alone. But she still had names on her list. 9 remained. 9 who signed off on the targeting system. 9 who profited from the deaths. She couldn't bring Riven back. But she could make sure the galaxy would never forget what they did. She looked at the bear she kept beside the control panel, still singed, still missing one eye. She didn't cry. She never did. But her hand brushed the bear like it was sacred. Like it was watching. She checked the next location. A mobile war cruiser on the edge of the Elker system. Its commander was a man who once sold Nova out for a shipment of nerve gas and a promotion. He would be harder to reach. But she would reach him. The Empire thought they were the storm. But storms pass. She was something else. Something slower. Something colder. Something that waited in silence and struck when you thought the sun had risen. She was not a ghost. She was not a hero. She was a mother. And she was still counting. Ask ChatGPT. The Elker system spun with false peace, its stars glowing warm over a fleet that had never seen defeat. The mobile war cruiser Dominion of Order floated through space like a steel deity, its hull reinforced with shield tech stolen from 7 fallen worlds. It wasn't just a battleship. It was a moving fortress, a city of war designed to be invincible. Inside its core tower sat Commander Cale Braun, once a field operative, now promoted to legend by the propaganda machine of the Empire. He was the kind of man who traded morality for medals and war both with pride. Years ago, he had shared drinks with Nova Kane, laughed with her over old scars, then sold her coordinates to a rival contractor in exchange for a shipment of nerve agents and a better rank. The moment she saw his name on the null seed list, she didn't even hesitate. Nova's ship approached the Dominion of Order cloaked in debris from a passing asteroid storm. The Empire believed in walls and codes, but she had learned long ago that the best way to break into something was to let it invite you in. She activated a decoy pod on a collision course with the ship's outer hull. As expected, the defense grid intercepted it and pulled her in under the assumption it was wreckage. While the cruiser's crew scoured the debris for threats, she slipped in through the maintenance exhaust port, a gap she remembered from years ago when she had trained with the engineers who built this exact class of vessel. They had laughed when she memorized schematics no one else cared about. Now those laughs echoed only in her memory, long dead and buried. Inside the cruiser, Nova moved like a ghost through familiar halls. The corridors were wider than she remembered, cleaner, the lighting colder. The personnel had changed. No one knew her face anymore, and that made her smile. She bypassed checkpoints using outdated clearance codes from her Widow Protocol database, each one still active because the Empire had grown complacent. As she entered the command level, she planted force-shaped charges in structural weak points masked as ventilation valves. Not to destroy the cruiser. Not yet. Just to remind them it could fall. She found Cale Braun in the captain's mess, giving a speech to junior officers about leadership and sacrifice. She watched from the shadows, studying the new lines in his face, the way he held his drink, the gleam of a medallion he didn't earn. When the speech ended, he retired to his private quarters, unaware that Nova walked the same steps just 3 doors behind. His room was filled with trophies, weapons from defeated enemies, shrunken flags, fragments of alien armor. And in the center, on a display stand under glass, was a familiar sight. Riven's bear. Half-burned, missing its eye, the exact one she had buried beneath the rubble after the strike. This wasn't hers. This was the original. The one Riven had held the morning he died. Braun had taken it. As a souvenir. Her hands shook. Not from fear. From rage so dense it nearly blinded her. She didn't kill him then. She could have. But it would have been too clean. Too fast. Instead, she disabled the lights, stepped behind him as he poured himself a drink, and whispered his name. He turned, startled, his glass shattering on the floor. She hit him once, hard enough to dislocate his jaw, then chained him to the interrogation rig in the corner of his room. He tried to speak, tried to beg, but she had disabled his voice with a neurostun round. He could only blink. She showed him the bear. She showed him the files. She played back a clip from the Operation Null Seed meeting, his voice approving the strike package labeled as low collateral risk. She showed him the video of Parn Mexis muttering apologies in blood. She didn't speak the whole time. Her silence said more than words ever could. When the video ended, she turned away and left the room, sealing the door behind her. Then she broadcasted the footage through the ship's internal feed. Every soldier, technician, and officer aboard watched their hero become a monster in real time. Some froze. Some cried. Some vomited. And some began to question. She returned to her ship and triggered the charges she had planted. They didn't destroy the cruiser. They just disabled the shield cores, fried the sensor grid, and left it floating powerless in space. A message. Not to kill. To expose. To humiliate. The Dominion of Order, once thought untouchable, now drifted like an open wound across the stars, bleeding secrets and shame. Within an hour, rebellion cells across 5 systems hacked into the feed and used it to rally support. Nova hadn't just killed a man. She had shattered a symbol. But her mission didn't end there. She had found something in Kale's private logs. A communication thread between Empire High Command and a Deep Space AI Council known only as Exarch 9. This council wasn't military. It was economic, algorithmic, unseen by the public. It had authorized Operation Null Seed not for security reasons, but to manipulate genetic markets and influence population control algorithms across colonial sectors. Killing children wasn't strategy. It was economics. She set a course for the orbital vault where Exarch 9 operated, a Dyson Ring satellite orbiting Jupiter's third moon. It was protected by 4 autonomous defense layers and an identity barrier that could only be bypassed with a living genetic key from the original authorization chain. Braun had been that key. She had already taken a sample from him before leaving the cruiser. In her mind, the pieces clicked together. The Empire wasn't just a military machine. It was a corporate execution network hiding behind uniforms and flags. En route to the vault, she received an encrypted message. It was short. Just 2 words. We know. Then her ship's power flickered. An EMP burst from an unknown source had knocked out everything except her life support and engines. She rerouted power manually, using emergency conduits she hadn't touched in years. As she stabilized the ship, a proximity alert sounded. A fleet was waiting for her at Jupiter. Not Empire. Something else. Something older. A silent wall of ships with no heat signature and no transponder codes. She recognized them from old war records. Red Sigma Protocol cleanup units. Machines built to erase threats when human assets failed. They had come for her. She sat in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the wall of silent ships. Her reflection stared back at her in the cracked screen. She touched the burn mark on her arm from years ago. It had never healed. Just like the memory of Riven. She opened the weapon bay and activated a deep signal, one she hadn't used since her days in the Assassin Corps. It broadcast a singular phrase. I'm not finished. The silent ships didn't move. They waited. So did she. Because the next strike wouldn't be with blades or bullets. It would be with truth, beamed across every corner of the galaxy, encoded in the blood of a mother who had lost everything. The Empire had tried to erase her. But some ghosts don't fade. They learn how to haunt. The silence from the Red Sigma fleet did not last long. They began to move in formation, not aggressively but with precision, surrounding Nova's ship like a ritual instead of an ambush. Their intent was not to destroy, not yet. They were programmed to assess first, eliminate second, and erase all evidence last. Their design wasn't just military. It was historical deletion. Any enemy worthy of a Red Sigma deployment was treated not as a target but as a data corruption to be corrected, cleansed, and forgotten. Nova had seen these ships before, long ago in a classified training vid buried beneath layers of Empire disinformation. She remembered the phrase used to describe their purpose, not to kill the enemy, but to unmake them. She had no intention of being unmade. With manual overrides rerouted and her power only partially restored, Nova initiated a dormant protocol built into her stolen craft, one reserved for pre-war infiltration units. A ghostwave ping, encoded with scrambled identifiers that mimicked a dying broadcast drone. To the Red Sigma AI, it would look like a corrupted survivor signal from a previously eliminated target. Confused by the contradiction, the fleet slowed, pausing its advance. Nova used the seconds she bought to dive into the core systems of her ship, splicing together 3 different firewalls to reroute remaining power into propulsion and jamming. Her ship jerked violently forward, cutting through the gaps between the larger vessels before they could sink and fire. As her ship spun toward Jupiter's shadow, she uploaded the entire contents of Operation Null Seed, Exarch 9's ledger, and Commander Brown's confessions into the broadcast node wired into her spine. This wasn't for blackmail anymore. This wasn't a strike. This was a flood. The truth exploded across the net, hijacking civilian data streams, pirate radios, outlaw drones, even entertainment systems. Screens on remote colonies blinked to life with the image of Riven's teddy bear, followed by names, footage, recordings, and numbers. So many numbers. Children assigned values, evaluated for obedience potential, eliminated for future risk. For the first time, the Empire could not bury the dead. Their names were out. The truth was unkillable now. The broadcast reached Earth within hours. At first, officials denied everything, blamed it on a rogue algorithm, a fabrication by hostile entities. But the names were real. The signatures were verified. The shock turned to fury. Colonies revolted. Military officers defected. Old alliances crumbled under the weight of betrayal. And deep within the rings of Jupiter, Exarch 9 tried to isolate itself. But it was too late. Nova had left more than data behind. She had planted a virus in the genetic key taken from Bron. One that would trigger the shutdown of every AI system connected to Red Sigma, including Exarch 9. As her ship drifted beneath the planet's magnetic field, she watched the great machines flicker, glitch, and finally fall dark. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She didn't even speak. Victory wasn't joy. It was silence. Heavy and full. She sat alone in the cockpit, Riven spare beside her, the screen flashing with alerts she ignored. There were still people out there who had signed the order. Some were dead. Some were hiding. She didn't need to find them anymore. Now the galaxy would. She wasn't the executioner now. She had become the match. The flame was spreading. Others would carry it. With the ship limping from damage, she docked on a backwater moon near the edge of map space. The terrain was sharp, desert-like, littered with stone ruins and echoes of long-extinct civilizations. She built a small shelter out of scavenged parts, nothing large, just enough for one person. No weapons, no tracking systems. Just silence and wind. In the center of that shelter, she rebuilt Riven's room from memory. The blue sheets with star patterns. The plastic model of a solar racer on the shelf. The sketch he once made of a dragon with a crown. And the bear. She placed it at the head of the bed and stepped back. She stood there for hours. Not moving. Not thinking. Her mind tried to fill the silence with memories, but they didn't come as images anymore. They came as absences. As weight. She whispered his name once, not as a call, but as a promise. Then she turned away and walked outside. The stars above the moon were too many to count. One of them pulsed faintly red, a signal flare from a nearby rebellion. The galaxy was changing. Not healed. Not fixed. But aware. Nova knew she couldn't return to who she was. And she wasn't needed for what came next. People had seen her story. Heard her message. Others had taken up arms. Others had begun their own lists. In her final act, she opened the logbook encrypted within her spine's neural core. There was one name left. Hers. The Widow Protocol had been written in blood and code. It had no exit clause. She had always known the end would come when the last name was crossed. The logbook requested confirmation. She stared at the blinking cursor. Not out of fear. But because part of her still hoped for another option. Maybe redemption. Maybe rest. Maybe one day waking up and forgetting the sound of drones and the scent of ash. She gave confirmation. The logbook closed. The neural core shut down. Her enhancements deactivated one by one. Muscles slowed. Reflexes dulled. Vision blurred. Not death. But an end to being the weapon she was. The ship's systems blinked into stasis mode. No more broadcasts. No more messages. Just her. Human again. Months passed. A scavenger crew discovered the moon while tracing a rogue signal. They found the shelter. Found the room. Found the bear. And found the logbook, still pulsing with residual data. One of the scavengers, a girl no older than 13, touched the bear and felt a memory that wasn't hers. She accessed the logbook and read everything. The footage. The names. The fire. The silence. And at the end, a message encoded only to appear if someone with Nova's genetic markers opened it. It said simply this. If you find this, I couldn't stop. But I made sure they paid. You don't have to be like me. But if you ever have to choose fire. The girl closed the logbook. Her eyes glowed faintly. Not machine glow. Something else. She looked up at the stars, not in wonder, but with understanding. Then she picked up the bear and walked away from the shelter, never looking back. Somewhere in the galaxy, a new voice would rise. Not a weapon. Not an assassin. But a witness. And the Empire would remember. Because ghosts don't fade. They leave trails. And Nova Kane had blazed hers across the stars.